Propaganda. Many use the word when talking about countries like North Korea, Kazakhstan, Iran. Countries viewed as authoritarian through the lens of the Western media. Press freedom, freedom of thought. People use those terms when talking about countries like the United States, France, Australia, democracies. In 1988, Noam Chomsky co-authored a book with Edward Herman called Manufacturing Consent. It blasted apart the notion that media acts as a check on political power, that media inform the public, serve the public, so that we can better engage in the political process. In fact, media manufacture our consent. They tell us what those in power need them to tell us so we can fall in line. Democracy is staged with the help of media that work as propaganda machines. Media operate through 5 filters. The first has to do with ownership. Mass media firms are big corporations. Often they're part of even bigger conglomerates. Their end game, profit. And so it's in their interests to push for whatever guarantees that profit. Critical journalism takes second place to the needs and interests of the corporation. The second filter exposes the real role of advertising. Media costs a lot more than consumers will ever pay. So who fills the gap? Advertisers. And what are the advertisers paying for? Audiences. And so it isn't so much that the media are selling you a product, their output. They're also selling advertisers a product, you. How does the establishment manage the media? That's the third filter. Journalism cannot be a check on power because the very system encourages complicity. Governments, corporations, big institutions know how to play the media game. They know how to influence the news narrative. They feed media scoops, official accounts, interviews with the experts. They make themselves crucial to the process of journalism. So those in power and those who report on them are in bed with each other. If you want to challenge power, you'll be pushed to the margins. Your name won't be down. You won't be getting in. You've lost your access. You've lost the story. When the media, journalists, whistleblowers, sources, stray away from the consensus, they get flagged. That's the fourth filter. When the story is inconvenient for the powers that be, you'll see the flak machine in action, discrediting sources, trashing stories, and diverting the conversation. To manufacture consent, you need an enemy, a target. That common enemy is the fifth filter. Communism, terrorists, immigrants, a common enemy. A boogeyman to fear helps corral public opinion. 5 filters, one big media theory. Consent is being manufactured all around you, all the time.
Good morning, everyone. June 9th, 2019. I'm Eric. How's everyone doing this morning? I hope you're well. As you can see here at IntelliHub, and this particular article comes from Caitlin Johnstone. 32 tips for navigating a society that is full of propaganda and manipulation. That's a rather lengthy piece, so I'm only going to hit the enumerated portion. This is probably going to be a lengthy video. Number one, again, this is 32 tips for navigating a society filled with propaganda. Number one, understand the fact that humans are storytelling animals, and whatever or whoever controls the stories controls the humans. Mental narrative dominates human consciousness. Thought is essentially one continuous churning monologue about the self and what it reckons is going on in its world. And that monologue is composed entirely of mental stories. These stories can and will be manipulated on an individual scale by people we encounter, and on a mass scale by skillful propagandists. We base our actions on our mental assessments of what's going on. In the world, and those mental assessments can be manipulated by narrative control. Number two, be humble enough and open enough to know that you can be fooled. Your cognitive wiring is susceptible to the same hacks as everyone else, and manipulators of all sorts are always looking to exploit those vulnerabilities, just like hackers in a computer system. Number three, and I can't use my arrows to scroll down here, watch people's behavior and ignore the stories they tell about their behavior. This applies to people in your life, to politicians, and to governments. Narratives can be easily manipulated and distorted in many different ways, while behavior itself, when examined with as much objectivity as possible, cannot be. Pay attention to behavior in this way, and eventually you'll start noticing a large gap between what some people's actions say and what their words say. Those peoples are the manipulators. Of course, you do not trust a manipulator. Number four, be suspicious of people who keep telling you what they are and how they are, because they're trying to manipulate your narrative about them. Be suspicious of people who keep telling you what you are and how you are, because they're trying to manipulate your narrative about you. Number five, learn to see how trust and sympathy learn to see how trust and sympathy are used by manipulators to trick people into subscribing to their narratives about what's going on. Every manipulator uses trust and or sympathy as a primer for their manipulations. Because if you don't have trust or sympathy for them, you're not going to mentally subscribe to their stories. And this is true of mass media outlets. It's true of State Department press releases which implore you to have sympathy for the people of Nation X. And it's true of family members along with co-workers. Once you've spotted that manipulator, your task is to kill off all of your sympathy for them and your trust in them, no matter how hard they start playing the victim to suck you back in. Number 6. Be suspicious of anyone who refuses to articulate themselves clearly. Word salading is a tactic notoriously used by abusive narcissists because it keeps the victim confused and unable to figure out what's going on. If they can't get a clear handle on what the manipulative abuser is saying, they can't form their own solid position in relation to it, and the abuser knows this. Now, okay, that happened quickly. Okay. Number 7. Familiarize yourself with cognitive bias, the glitches in human cognition which cause us to perceive things in a way that is not rational. Pay special attention to confirmation bias, the backfire effect, and the illusionary truth effect. Humans have an annoying tendency to seek out cognitive ease in their information gathering and avoid cognitive dissonance, rather than seeking out what's true regardless of whether it brings us cognitive ease or dissonance. This means we tend to choose what we believe based on whether believing it is psychologically comfortable rather than whether it's solidly backed by facts and evidence. This is a weakness in our cognitive wiring, and manipulators can and do exploit it constantly. Number 8. Trust your own understanding above anyone else's. It might not be perfect, but it's a damn sight better than letting your understanding be controlled by narrative managers and dopey partisan groupthink, or by literally anyone else in a narrative landscape that is saturated with propaganda and manipulation. You won't get everything right, but betting on your own understanding is the very safest bet on the table. It can be intimidating to stand alone and sort out the true from the false by yourself on an instance-by-instance basis. But the alternative is giving someone else authority over your understanding of the world. Number 9. Understand that propaganda is the single most overlooked and underappreciated aspect of our society. Everyone's constantly talking about what's wrong with the world, but hardly any of those discussions are centered around the fact that the public's been manipulated into supporting the creation and continuation of those problems by mass media propaganda. The fact that powerful people are constantly manipulating the way we think, act, and vote should be at the forefront of everyone's awareness, not relegated to occasional discussions in fringe circles. Powerful people are constantly trying to manipulate you. They manipulate you into believing official narratives of events. They manipulate you into believing you're somehow guilty of something that happened over 100 years ago. They manipulate others into thinking that they are victims. And it goes on and on and on and on. Now, I understand that Noam Chomsky is a classical liberal, but classical liberals are not all that bad. It's the neolibs and the neocons that have taken these ideologies to their extremities. Number 10, respect the fact that science of modern propaganda has been in research and development for over a century. And a lot of people like to credit Edward Bernays as being the father of modern propaganda, but he got his ideas from Sigmund Freud and Gustav Le Bon. Le Bon being the actual father of propaganda. He's the one that figured out how groups, how people act differently in groups, and how once you're in a group or a crowd, you just become another cell in that organism. So it's been in development for some time now, and there are companies and people out there who have gotten exceedingly efficient at manipulating the masses through this mechanism of propaganda. Now, if you compare propaganda, the development of propaganda, or the ability to manipulate and control masses with all the military advancements that's been made in the last 2 decades, you can get an idea of how sophisticated this science must be now. And it is. It's very sophisticated. I've done videos showing how they still use subliminals in a lot of stuff. They are far, far ahead of us in terms of research and understanding of the methods of manipulation, the human psyche toward ends which benefit the powerful. Understand that Western mass media propaganda rarely consists of full, outright lies. At most, such outlets will credulously publish the things that are told to them by government agencies, which lie all the time. More often, the deception comes in the form of distortions, half-truths, and omissions. Pay more attention to discrepancies in things that are covered versus things that aren't, and to what they're not saying. And we can bear witness to these things each and every time a mass shooting occurs, right? But in the case of 9/11, the government just flat out lied. Number 12, put effort into developing a good news sense, a sense for what's newsworthy and what's not. This takes time and practice, but it lets you see which newsworthy stories are going unreported by the mass media and which non-stories are being overblown to shape an establishment-friendly narrative. 13. Be patient and compassionate with yourself when it comes to developing your narrative navigating skills. Like any other skill set, it takes practice. Takes practice. All skill sets takes practice. And if you don't practice, then you're going to suck. And I've gotten lots of practice at this. But be patient and compassionate with yourself, because you're gonna make mistakes, and navigating these narratives. Number 14. Find reliable news reports who have a good sense for navigating the narrative matrix and keep track of them to orientate yourself and stay on top of what's going on. Use individual reporters, not outlets. No outlet is 100% solid, but some reporters are pretty close on some specific subjects. That's 14. 15. Don't let paranoia be your primary or only tool for navigating the narrative matrix. Some people's only means of understanding the world is to become intensely suspicious of everything and everyone, which is about as useful as a compass which tells you that every direction is north. Spend some time in conspiracy and media criticism circles and you'll run into many such people. Rejecting everything as false leaves you with nothing as true. Number 16. Hold your worldview loosely enough that you can change it at any time in the light of new information, but not so loosely that it can be slapped out of your head by someone telling you what to think in a confident, authoritative tone. As Carl Sagan once said, it pays to keep an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out. Number 17. Speaking of confident, authoritative tones, be suspicious of confident, authoritative tones. It's amazing how much traction people can get with a narrative just by posturing as though they know that what they are saying is true, whether they're an MSNBC pundit or a popular conspiracy YouTuber. 18 rather. Be aware that sociopaths exist. There are people who, in varying degrees, do not care what happens to others, and these are the types of people who will use manipulation to get their way whenever it serves them. And by the way, sociopaths tend to occupy positions of authority. CEOs, police, politicians, clergy, these types of individuals. 19. Be aware of projection, and be aware of the fact that it cuts both ways. Unhealthy people tend to project their wickedness onto others, while healthy people tend to protect their goodness. Don't let your goodness trick you into thinking there aren't monsters who will deceive and manipulate you, and don't let sociopaths project their own sinister motives onto you by telling you how rotten you are. 20. Be suspicious of those who excessively advocate civility, rules, and politeness. Manipulators thrive on rules and civility because they know how to manipulate them. Someone who's willing to color outside the lines and get angry at someone noxious, even when they're acting within the rules, makes a manipulator very uncomfortable. These are the people who tells you to calm down and behave yourself when you are rightfully upset. 21. Isn't it amazing I can count? Oh, that's right. I didn't go to public schools. That's right. 21. Meditation, mindfulness, self-inquiry, and other practices are powerful tools which can help you understand your own inner processes. which in turn helps you understand how manipulators can manipulate you and how they manipulate others. 22. Be relentlessly honest with yourself about your own inner narratives and the various ways you engage in manipulation. You can't navigate your way through the narrative control matrix if you aren't clear on your own role in it. 23. Understand that truth doesn't generally move any way that is pleasing to the ego, i.e., in Hollywood scripts are written to appeal to any narrative that points to a Hollywood ending where the bad guys gets karate kicked into lava and the hero gets the girl is manufactured. Russiagate and QAnon are both perfect examples of an egocally pleasing narrative with the promise of a Hollywood ending, either by Trump or his cohorts being dragged off in chains, or by the white hats overcoming the deep state and throwing all the Democrats and never Trumpers in prison for pedophilia. Ain't gonna happen, folks. And it's not. Although some of them will get thrown in prison for pedophilia. 24. Try to view the world with fresh eyes rather than with your tired, old, grown-up eyes, which have taught you to see all of this as normal. I haven't been taught to see any of this as normal. I don't know what the fuck Caitlin's talking about here. Hold an image in your mind of what a perfectly healthy and harmonious world would look like. The sharp contrast between this image and the world we have now allows you to see through the campaign of the propagandists to normalize things like war, poverty, ecocide, and impotent electoral systems which keep seeing the same government behavior regardless of who people vote for. None of it is normal, people. 25. Know that the truth has no political party, and neither do the social engineers. All political parties are used to manipulate the masses in various ways, and nuggets of truth can and do emerge from any of them. They do. 26. Remain always aware of the simple dynamic. The people who become billionaires are generally the ones who are sociopathic enough to do whatever it takes to get ahead. This class has been able to buy up near total narrative control via media ownership / influence, corporate lobbying, think tank funding, and campaign finance, and are thus able to manipulate the public into consenting to agendas which benefit nobody but plutocrats and their lackeys. And this explains pretty much every major problem that we are facing right now. 27. Shit. My computer doesn't know how to count, it looks like. Oh, look at that. '27. Understand that nations are pure narrative constructs. They only exist to the extent that people agree to pretend that they do. The narrative managers know this, and they exploit the fact that most of us don't. Take Julian Assange. Perfect example. He was pried out of the embassy and imprisoned by an extremely obvious collaboration between the US, UK, Sweden, Ecuador, and Australia, yet they each pretend that they were acting as separate sovereign nations completely independently of one another. Right. 28. 28. Understand that war is the glue which holds the U.S. centralized empire together. Without the carrot of military economic alliance and the stick of military economic violence, the U.S. centralized empire would cease to exist. This is why war propaganda is constant and sometimes so forced that glaring plot holes become exposed. It's so important that they need to force it through, even if they can't get the narrative matrix around it constructed just right. Twenty-nine. Remember that when it comes to foreign policy, the neocons and neolibs are always wrong. They've been so remarkably consistent in this for so long that whenever there's a question about any narrative involving hostilities between the U.S. centralized power alliance and any other nation, you can just look at what Bill Kristol, Max Boot, and John Bolton are saying about it and believe the exact opposite. And that's a very, very good rule of thumb there. You cannot trust any of them people. John Bolton is fucking scum. 30. Notice how the manipulators like to split the population in two and then get them arguing over how they should serve the establishment. Arguing over whether it's better to vote Democrat or Republican. Arguing over whether it's better to increase hostilities with Iran and Venezuela or Syria and Russia. Over whether you should support the U.S. president or the FBI. Arguing over how internet censorship should happen and whom should be censored, rather than if censorship should happen in the first place. 31. And this is a big clue here. Watch out for appeals to emotion. It's much easier to manipulate someone by appealing to their feeling bits rather than their capacity for rational analysis, which is why anytime they want to manufacture support for military interventionism, you see pictures of dead children on news screens everywhere rather than a logical argument for the advantages of using military violence based on a thorough presentation of facts and evidence. You see the same strategy used in the guilt trips that they lay on third-party voters. It's all emotional hyperbole that crumbles under any fact-based scrutiny. So, they're always there to manipulate you. In fact, people like to believe that it's places like North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, and so on and so forth that uses propaganda the most heavily. But the truth of the matter is, it's the so-called freest nations that really lay the propaganda on thick. So, thought I would share this with you. I hope everyone has a great, great Sunday. If you like my content, please do give me a thumbs up, a share, subscribe. And by the way, subscribe to my BitChute channel, because I do put exclusive content there that I cannot put on YouTube. If I'm worthy of your spare dollars, you can use the PayPal link below, and you want to meet like-minded people, there are 2 Discord links there as well. Fucking A. Excuse me. Anyway, hope you all have a great day. Till next time, kill the state before the state kills you.